One was Hollywood's most beloved icon, the other the most powerful man in the world. And he absolutely despised him. While Paul Newman was charming audiences on the big screen, he was also making a seriously powerful enemy in the White House. But this wasn't just a simple political squabble. A liberal actor versus a conservative president. The real story of why Richard Nixon hated Paul Newman is a wild tale of political paranoia, celebrity activism, and one brazen prank so personal, it helped land the movie star on one of the most infamous documents in American history. We now know why a president, drowning in scandal and his own insecurities, would bother to target the guy from Cool Hand Luke. And what Paul Newman did when he found out? Well, that part is the stuff of legend. This is the story of two American titans on a collision course, a story that shows you who both men really were when the spotlights were off and the political knives came out. To get why there was so much bad blood between Paul Newman and Richard Nixon, you have to understand the two completely different worlds they came from, worlds that were practically guaranteed to clash in the chaos of the late 1960s. First, you have Paul Newman. By 1968, he wasn't just a movie star, he was an American ideal. With those piercing blue eyes, that easy charm, and a run of legendary roles in films like The Hustler and Cool Hand Luke, Newman was the perfect anti-hero. He was the rebel you couldn't help but root for. He was handsome, talented, and everybody loved him. But off-screen, Newman was a lot more than just a Hollywood persona. He was a committed family man, in an enduring 50-year marriage to actress Joanne Woodward. He was a philanthropist long before it was a celebrity trend, and a man who stood by his principles. He was also a legendary prankster who loved a good joke and never took himself or the glitz of Hollywood too seriously. Underneath that cool exterior was a man of deep conviction, a dedicated liberal who was getting more and more worried about where the country was headed. Then you have Richard Milhous Nixon. Where Newman's rise to fame seemed charmed and effortless, Nixon's was a story of non-stop grinding ambition. He was the guy who always felt like an underdog, constantly fighting for respect from the East Coast establishment and the liberal media he hated. He built his career on being tough on communism and promising law and order, a message that appealed to a silent majority of Americans terrified by the social changes of the 60s. Nixon was brilliant and politically savvy, but he was also crippled by deep insecurities and a sense of being persecuted. He saw enemies everywhere. This paranoia wasn't just a personality flaw, it was a key part of his political strategy. He had a massive chip on his shoulder and was famously sensitive, especially to one nickname that had followed him his whole career, Tricky Dick. The name suggested he was deceitful and would do anything to win. It stuck, and it drove him nuts because he saw it as an attack on his character. These two men basically represented two different Americas. Newman was the face of a new, progressive America that was questioning authority. Nixon was the voice of an older, more traditional America that felt it was under attack. As the 60s hit a boiling point, it was only a matter of time before the movie star's activism put him right in the president's crosshairs. The year 1968 was a pressure cooker for America. The country was at a breaking point. The Tet Offensive in Vietnam proved the government had been lying about progress in the war, which poured gasoline on the anti-war movement. President Lyndon B. Johnson, facing a rebellion in his own party, shocked everyone by announcing he wouldn't run for re-election. Then, the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy ripped the nation apart. It was a time of pure chaos and division. For many in Hollywood, staying quiet was no longer an option, and for Paul Newman, it was a moral duty to speak up. He was fiercely and publicly against the Vietnam War and became one of its most famous advocates. In the wild 1968 Democratic primary, his guy was Senator Eugene McCarthy, an anti-war candidate who dared to challenge a sitting president. To the political machine, McCarthy was a nobody, but to the anti-war movement, he was a hero. Newman threw all of his star power behind the campaign. He didn't just write a check, he hit the road, making appearances and using his fame to get the message out. He even served as a delegate for McCarthy at the chaotic 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago. In an era before every celebrity spouted off on social media, having one of the world's biggest movie stars actively campaigning for an anti-war insurgent was a massive deal. The Nixon campaign was paying very close attention. They saw Newman as more than just another Hollywood liberal. He was effective. He starred in national TV commercials for McCarthy, using his immense popularity to make the anti-war cause seem mainstream. To a man like Richard Nixon, who saw any opponent as a personal enemy, Paul Newman was no longer a movie star. He was a political threat, a charismatic foe working to tear down his vision for America. Newman's activism didn't stop with the war. He was a strong supporter of civil rights, women's rights, and environmental causes, all of which put him in direct opposition to Nixon's conservative platform. To the Nixon administration, Newman was the face of the radic lib movement, their sneering term for the radical liberals they thought were destroying the country. The battle lines were drawn. Paul Newman had stepped into the political arena, and he wasn't backing down. And in the paranoid halls of the Nixon White House, they decided that he needed to be treated like an enemy. While Newman's political activism was the main reason the Nixon White House had it in for him, one little prank is often cited as the personal cherry on top, the story that perfectly captures the clash between Newman's playful spirit and Nixon's thin-skinned personality. As the legend goes, it all started with a Jaguar. Newman, a famous car fanatic and race car driver, had a deal with a local dealership. They'd loan him a new Jaguar for the weekend as a promotion. To his surprise, Newman found out that during the week the same car was being rented out to another prominent figure, presidential candidate Richard Nixon. Once he learned he was sharing a car with his political opposite, Newman's mischievous side took over. He couldn't resist. Before he returned the car one Sunday, he left a small handwritten note for the next driver. It read, "Dear Mr. Nixon, you should have no trouble driving this car. It has a tricky clutch. Paul Newman." It sounds harmless, right? But to Nixon, the key word was tricky. He had been tormented for years by the nickname Tricky Dick. That one word was a direct jab, a clever personal poke that showed Newman knew exactly who he was dealing with and wasn't afraid to needle him. For a guy as sensitive and grudge-prone as Richard Nixon, this was a major sign of disrespect from a Hollywood elite he already couldn't stand. The grudge was set. This personal animosity, combined with Newman's public activism, created the perfect storm. Inside the White House, Nixon's team was formalizing his resentments into the political enemies project. The goal was laid out in a chillingly direct memo from White House counsel John Dean on August 16, 1971, to figure out how we can use the available federal machinery to screw our political enemies. This wasn't just a list of people they disliked. It was a plan to weaponize the government. They intended to use the IRS for tax audits, deny federal grants, and use any means necessary to harass and neutralize their opponents. On September 9, 1971, the first official list of 20 names was produced. It included politicians, journalists, and labor leaders. And there at number 19 was one actor, Paul Newman. This list wasn't just a who's who of dissenters. It was a hit list. The story of how it was exposed and what happened when Paul Newman found his name on it tells you everything you need to know about his character. If you're enjoying this slice of hidden history, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss what we uncover next. Now back to the showdown between Hollywood's coolest rebel and the most powerful man in the world. Nixon's enemies list stayed secret for years, a dark project brewing in the White House. It only came to light in 1973, during the Watergate hearings that blew the lid off the administration's crimes. When the names were read before Congress, it sent a shockwave across America. The idea that the president was keeping a list to screw his political opponents was unbelievable. For many on the list, it was terrifying, but not for Paul Newman. When reporters called him for a reaction, they didn't find a man who was scared or angry. They found a man who was thrilled. His daughter, Nell Newman, later said her father was tickled pink to be on it. Newman's public response was a masterclass in defiant humor. He famously told the press that being on the list was his highest single honor. He even issued a satirical statement saying, "I am sending Gordon Liddy to pick up my award, and I would like to thank John Mitchell, Jeb Stuart Magruder, John Dean, and Maurice Stans for making this award possible." Naming the key Watergate crooks as the presenters of his award was a brilliant way to turn their threat into a punchline. He believed so strongly that being an enemy of the Nixon administration was a badge of honor that he got a copy of the list, framed it, and hung it proudly in his Connecticut home for the rest of his life. For Newman, the list was proof he was on the right side of history. He lived by the idea that a man with no enemies is a man of no character. Being an enemy of a president who would eventually resign in disgrace proved Newman's character was rock solid. The official White House memo explained why he was included. It read, "Radical lib causes, heavy McCarthy involvement in '68, used, effectively in nationwide TV commercials. 72 involvement certain." They were clearly worried about him. They saw him as a real political threat whose celebrity could sway the upcoming 1972 election. They were right to be worried, but trying to intimidate him just made him dig in his heels. His reaction was the complete opposite of the fear the list was meant to create. He joked that all the other actors in Hollywood were jealous. In his eyes, he'd won something bigger than an Oscar. He had earned the hatred of a corrupt president, and he couldn't have been prouder. Paul Newman's willingness to stand up to the president wasn't a one-off. It was just who he was. A man who lived by a fierce set of principles. That same integrity that landed him on Nixon's list also led to major rivalries in the ego-filled world of Hollywood. Two feuds really stand out. One with the king of cool, Steve McQueen, and another more philosophical clash with Rock Hudson. The rivalry with Steve McQueen is legendary. On paper, they should have been pals. They were two of the biggest stars in the world, both famous for their anti-hero cool, a love of car racing, and a hatred for Hollywood phoniness. But when they were cast together in the 1974 disaster movie, The Towering Inferno, their similarities just seemed to add fuel to the fire. The battle started with billing. In Hollywood, who gets top billing is a big deal, and both Newman and McQueen's contracts demanded it. The studio came up with a weird solution. On the posters, McQueen's name is first, but Newman's is slightly higher, so either man could claim to be the top star depending on how you looked at it. That didn't solve the tension on set. McQueen, who was reportedly insecure about Newman's acting chops, became obsessed with making sure they were treated as equals. The feud hit its peak when McQueen counted the lines in the script and discovered Newman had 12 more than him. He reportedly refused to work until the script was changed to give him exactly 12 more lines, making them perfectly even. Newman was furious, seeing it as petty and unprofessional. His friend, writer A.E. Hotchner, said Newman called McQueen a chicken set for the line-counting stunt. This on-set war showed Newman's backbone. He had zero patience for ego-driven games, even from a star as huge as McQueen. His conflict with Rock Hudson, on the other hand, was less of a direct rivalry and more of a clash of beliefs. To Newman, Rock Hudson was the embodiment of everything he hated about the old Hollywood studio system. Hudson was a manufactured star. His name, his backstory, and his fake love life were all carefully crafted by studio bosses to sell the image of the perfect American leading man. Newman, a student of the actor's studio who believed in method acting, saw this as dishonest. He believed in finding the raw emotional truth in a character, not just projecting a polished fake image. He saw Hudson's success as a symbol of a system that cared more about image than substance, and marketing over actual talent. While stories of a dramatic public confrontation at a party are likely just Hollywood legend, Newman's disdain for what Hudson represented was well known. He wasn't just taking a shot at one actor, he was taking a shot at the entire system of manufactured stardom that he felt devalued the art form he loved. These conflicts, from the White House to the Hollywood soundstage, all paint a picture of the same man. Paul Newman was a person of unshakable principle. He valued honesty and courage and had no time for people who didn't, whether they were an insecure movie star or a paranoid president. The story of Paul Newman and Richard Nixon is more than just a historical footnote. It's a powerful lesson in character. On one side, You have a president so wrapped up in his own paranoia that he used the power of his office to target a movie star over politics and a joke. The enemy's list, which was meant to be a weapon, ended up becoming a symbol of his administration's corruption. It revealed the smallness of a man in the world's most powerful job. On the other side, you have Paul Newman, an actor who, at the peak of his fame, risked his career to stand up for what he believed in. When the most powerful man in the world declared him an enemy, he didn't back down. He laughed. He framed the evidence and hung it on his wall as his greatest honor. His famous line about the list being his highest single honor wasn't just a clever comeback. It was a powerful statement of his values. He was declaring that he would rather be the enemy of a corrupt government than its silent friend. It cemented his legacy not just as a brilliant actor or a generous philanthropist, but as a man of incredible courage and integrity. In the end, Richard Nixon resigned in disgrace, his legacy forever stained by Watergate and his enemy's project. Paul Newman's star only kept rising. He went on to win an Oscar, build a food empire that has donated hundreds of millions to charity, and create camps for sick children, all while remaining a beloved icon. The feud between the president and the movie star is a timeless reminder. Power doesn't last, but character does. And Paul Newman, the man who was tickled pink to be an enemy of the president, passed that test with flying colors. What do you think about this incredible piece of history? Does this story change how you see Paul Newman or Richard Nixon? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and check out our other deep dives into the untold stories that shaped our world. Thanks for watching.